On to your markets news now. Asian markets closed mixed, with Hong Kong and Chinese markets on a downer as President Donald Trump indicated the possible levying of 10% tariff increases on Chinese goods. The Nikkei share average rose by 1.6%. The Hang Seng index declined by 1.63%, while the Shanghai Composite Index closed down 0.9%. Over in the United States, U.S. stocks advanced on the first day of their trading this week following the inauguration of Donald Trump. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose by 1.24%. The S&P 500 ended the session up 0.9%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index closed up 0.64%. Well, locally, we see that the local all-share index is up 0.4%, and the rand is trading at 18.46 against the US dollar, 19.29 against the euro, and 22.83 vis-a-vis the British pound. Gold is trading at $2,761 an ounce, while platinum is trading at $957 an ounce, and Brent crude oil trading at 78.92 cents a barrel. All right, for more on the markets and to unpack them for us, I'm joined by Bianca Botas. She's a director at Citadel Global. Thank you so much for joining us, Bianca. What's your sense of how U.S. markets performed on the first day after the Trump inauguration? And what are your other observations around global markets today?
Good afternoon. From a currency perspective, markets were clearly positioned for a worst-case scenario outcome. And following the inauguration, we actually saw the dollar index dip quite significantly on Monday, and it's currently trading about 1% weaker for the week so far. We, of course, saw quite a bit of volatility coming through during the lead up into that inauguration. But all in all, it's been a pretty upbeat picture for global markets during the course of the week. The rand is, of course, benefiting from the weaker dollar. Most major indices traded higher apart from China, and the DAX reached an all-time high earlier today. And this is, of course, on the back of President Trump coming across a little bit more moderate in terms of his stance on tariffs, and in particular in terms of that stance towards China.
So, I mean, obviously, he'll want to come across as credible with the people that voted for him. He made these statements early on. Is this then not the calm before the storm?
I think President Trump is very aware of the economic climate that he finds himself in. So yes, while he promised to bring jobs onshore and while he promised that America is really going to become an export destination, he also promised lower living costs, lower interest rates and lower inflation. And is going to have to actually balance those two aspects very carefully to make sure that his policies aren't inflationary and that they don't keep inflation and long-term interest rates higher for longer.
So locally, we got our consumer price inflation number for December that was up 3% on an annual basis compared to 2.9% in November. I think it was in line with market expectations. What are your thoughts on the number? And just in terms of the Reserve Bank later on this month having to decide on interest rates, what are your expectations?
As you mentioned, we saw a slight uptick from November in that reading, with inflation for December coming in at 3%, but it still beat market expectations. Markets were a little bit more aggressive in their expectations. And it still remains in the lower band or the lower end of the South African Reserve Bank's target band. We also saw core inflation easing to its lowest level since February 2022, so that's really a blip of good news there too. And we can expect the SABC to remain cautious in their approach, especially during the uncertainty in terms of US policy and how inflationary that could be. But given the fact that we are at that lower end of the band, we can expect the SABC to move towards a rate cut at the end of Jan.
We hope that you're right. You touched on the rand earlier. We know that it's had a bit of strength towards the end of last year. It's weakened, and now you do say that it's benefiting from the weaker dollar. What is your prognosis for the local currency, given all the uncertainty, particularly on the trade front?
So we obviously haven't seen it retreat all the way back to the levels that we've seen it at its weakest last year. And we also haven't seen it go back all the way to its strongest levels of last year. So it's kind of hovering here in the middle. And what we've seen over the past week is really an unwinding of this worst case scenario risk that's been driving the dollar higher. And the rand and its peers have been benefiting from this unwind in that worst case scenario risk expectation. In coming weeks, the rand is really well positioned to further benefit from an unwinding in the dollar. And when we take a look at local factors, when you actually strip out all of these global factors that are currently influencing the rand, and we just look at the local fundamentals and local factors, sentiment towards South Africa is really broadly positive at the moment as well, and that will also assist the rand to gain further ground. So currently, really not taking a dim view on the rand, and I do expect it to gain some further momentum from these levels.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bianca, for your time and insights. We've run out of time now. That was Bianca Botas. She's a director at Citadel Global.